Hi everyone. So reflection for the week is that since we were reading Parable of the Sower, I realized that I draw towards fantasy and stories that are similar to our world, and I find, world building that has nothing to do with our world, and there's too much detail. I kind of find myself getting lost in those details, and I really enjoy this book particularly is because this is the debate that I think we all are in the middle of right now. That in terms of just resources being scarce and water being scarce and climate change and prices rising. So, just a little bit of a backstory about Pakistan. So, Pakistan faced the worst flooding, urban flooding in the history of our country, and that was because of climate change. So, 1 out of 6 people in Pakistan, a country of 220 million, were affected by the floods. The crops were destroyed. People died underwater. Houses were destroyed. So, we have a lot of people now living as refugees within the country, and prices of vegetables, and vegetables are very it's a staple diet for a lot of people in Pakistan, and they have completely shot up, and it's become unaffordable now to eat those vegetables. And people who have lost the crop are now in a position very similar to the one that we see Lauren and his family and her family in. And I realized that this is such a closely drawn story that this can very well happen. And we see that Lauren and her family are struggling, and there's this case where the thieves are trying to steal rabbits from the Moss family, I think it is. And I can feel the pain and I can feel the urgency, and I feel that because sometimes in Pakistan as well. So we have, we have gates, we have alarm systems here. And that I think comes out of scarcity because of income disparity in our country as well. And I can totally imagine a world where, thieves are coming in and just, killing or stealing things that they don't have. And this is out of desperation. And I see this desperation in this story. And I completely like, it's an eye opener, and I completely relate to it. And I think it's written really well as well. So I'm just going to read some passages that I found really interesting. So Lauren is talking about Keith, who is 13 years old, and she talks about the need to keep a gun. So her father says that it's too soon for her to keep a gun, and she's trying to make an emergency pack. And she says, that I want a gun with it so I can protect myself. And he says that it's too unsafe to keep a gun because the boys, her brothers, can steal it, or thieves can come and steal it. So she talks about Keith, and Keith is 13, and he's been like, he really wants a gun because of, I think, the way boys are, or he's been going to training and he feels like he can protect himself. So it says, he wouldn't steal from dad, he wouldn't dare, but he has stolen from me. Only little things so far. He wants a gun, though, the way thirsty people want water. And I found this analogy so great because it immediately like makes you think that when you're thirsty, you really want water. And he has this drive to fight back, and he really wants a gun. So it just made me like think that it's just fantastic how she puts it together. Another sort of passage that I really liked was because my theme of the research paper is the concept of God, and I think Lauren also really sort of peppers the concept of God in this book because her father is a preacher, but she thinks God has changed. So it's really interesting that she says that, initially I shared that in my reading progress as well, that God is changed and my father's God is not my God. So this passage also sort of helps me understand what her concept is. And dad is right, but he doesn't go far enough. God is change, and in the end, God prevails. But God exists to be shaped. It isn't enough for us to just survive, limping along, playing business as usual, while things get worse and worse. It's If that's the shape we give to God, then someday we must become too weak, too poor, too hungry, too sick to defend ourselves. Then we'll be wiped out. So this you can see this girl who is struggling, who's panicked, who's scared, who's uncertain of the future, and we see her sort of align her beliefs to the existing beliefs that her family holds. And she says that this is how I perceive God. I perceive God as change, and if I feel change is needed right now in my life, then that is God, you know. So it really I think affected me, and I think the writing is just brilliant. And I think the next few days I'm just gonna be finishing up this book so that I can answer the discussion questions as well. But yes, I mean, I think it's been quite great. I'm back home, like I said before as well. This week I was writing a review for a newspaper, so I had some additional reading to do. So I read this book called Send Nudes by Sabah Sams, and she's a British short story writer, and I quite enjoyed her book. And I wrote the review and I've submitted it, and I hope it's what the newspaper wanted. The newspaper is called Dawn Newspaper. That's Pakistan's leading newspaper. And yeah, it's a privilege to be writing for them. Thank you.